Welcome to History of the Netherlands, where we explore the events and characters that, over time, have transformed a swamp into an amazing modern marvel. Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to what is possibly the most random History of the Netherlands contribution yet. Long-time listeners will be aware that alongside being passionate about the history of our boggy swamp, we also carry a deep love for the game of cricket. The Venn-diagram intersection between those two things can often leave a lot to be desired. However, somehow, Julian Smith, our intrepid co-creator, producer, and frequent voice of excitement in the background, managed to find a small but wondrous plot of podcasting turf from which to tell an amazing story about cricket being played in the Netherlands during World War I. This opportunity came about on one of our all-time favorite podcasts called The Final Word, which is a cricket-themed podcast that delves deeply into the many fascinating stories that abound through the long history of the game. So in this small piece, you will hear the two Final Word podcast hosts, Adam and Geoff, talking with Julian, who unravels the story for us. You do not need to know anything about or have any interest in cricket to enjoy this story, which we hope you do.
All right, let us play a little bit of Nerd Pledge. Nerd Pledge, the game we play with all the nice people on the internet, including the ones watching us record this show. It works like this. People fund this program for their own reasons, God knows why, but they do. And they do that by sending in contributions of currencies that do not equate to normal notes, coins, etc. They're very specific numbers. The numbers relate to cricket, and we have to guess what the number means. At least that's how it normally works, except in this case, the first number on the show today, which came in from Julian, aka one of the co-hosts of the History of the Netherlands podcast, who sent in €1.46 and sent in a clue, Adam. But why don't you take it from here?
Well, yeah, so I was to be solving this, right? Geoff, you allocated this to me. I spent some time with Julian last year, of course, when we were there for our Final Word Dutch tour. €146. So I'll read the clue first. It's about domestic cricket in the Netherlands and goes way back into DOB territory. It's extraordinarily obscure, but I got lost reading in years gone by and found a guy whose life, from what I've been able to piece together, sounds wild. Good luck. It's a very dusty old bastard time era. That's a subsequent message that you sent through. And the third piece you sent through was not trying to give away my upcoming nerd pledge, but as a batsman, he's described as an artist of the purest water. Now, with that third bit, I went hunting. And, I found a couple of hooks to references to artists of the purest water and so on. I was scanning.
Never heard that phrase before.
Well, nor had I. And I'm looking forward to hearing Julian's perspective on this. So, nor had I, but it does come up a couple of times. And I thought, wait, where's the cricket link? I threw a couple of names at Julian. Is it the surname linked to a poet and all the rest of it? But I wasn't getting very far. And I said to him, look, here's the long and the short of it. We want to feature this on episode 150. I need something to go on. Give me something to go on. And then he gave me so much to go on. I'm like, hang on. This is a story that you are deeply committed to. We have never brought in a third host to work with us in an episode. Of course, we've had many co-hosts on Storytime. It's been part of the energy of the show, I reckon, is that we tend to mix it up. But never has anyone came in to answer their own question. But as soon as Julian
no
sent
one's
me through,
answered their own question. I will say once Bharat actually sent us through a nerd pledge, and while he was hosting, we did it on the show, but that's slightly different.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, this just felt it would have been wrong for me to have told the story of a player that Julian's about to tell us, because he's already done the research and he's a historian. He hosts a history podcast and he's a lovely communicator from his other job working as a tour host in Amsterdam. So what better time than to bring in one of our faves, Julian from the History of the Netherlands podcast, to tell us all about €146. Hello.
Hello, Adam. Hello, Geoff. Hello, everyone watching on Zoom. I feel like I've broken Nerd Pledge a little bit by coming on here and having to tell my own story.
I think you have, but I think you've done it in a good way. I think one of the good things about this format and the show itself is that we change, we evolve, we mutate, our cells divide at an alarming rate. We grow new extremities. We are never going to be the same as the thing we were the week before. So you're just part of that Darwinian charge through the passage of time.
Well, happy days. I can explain the clue for you, but maybe I will leave it to the end a little bit because it might make a bit more sense if I get to the end of the story to explain the clue.
Often that's the way it works best, when there's some obscure bit at the end of the clue, and that might be the last thing that Geoff or I come to after telling every other part of the story. So that's a nice device, yes.
All right. So as you just explained, Adam, I do make a history podcast called History of the Netherlands. And I'm a big fan of cricket as well. So I thought it would be appropriate to make a nerd pledge, which combined my two interests here of Dutch history and cricket. And so I went digging through old newspapers and found this story, which was just so good. I felt like it had to be told on Nerd Pledge. And yeah, the number is €1.46. And like I said, it's kind of about like the DOB territory, but actually goes a little bit before then, because I think the DOB is about players who played between the world wars. And this is actually about a player who played during the First World War.
Well, yeah, that's right. So just to explain to those who haven't been listening for a long time, we gained a lot of new listeners during the Ashes. A DOB, a dusty old bastard, where it started was when Geoff and I realised that there were so many players that turned out for England in the wild interwar period, and many of them played 2 or 3 or 4 test matches, and we felt that they deserved their moment in the sun on a podcast 80 years later in a category with a slightly pejorative title, Dusty Old Bastards. So we would highlight their stories in totality and tell the full story of their career beyond 2 test matches for 17 runs or something like that. But there's been a concentration of them between the wars. But even better, given there's been no cricket in England in World War I, of course, or anywhere else for that matter, but a bit different, I suppose, for the Netherlands, who had a different experience.
Yeah, exactly. So because of the war, the first class cricket was cancelled in pretty much all of the countries where it was played. So there was no first class cricket in England or Australia or New Zealand or South Africa for almost all of the years between 1914 and 1918. But there was still cricket played in the armed forces. And also there was still cricket played in the Netherlands, because in the First World War, the Netherlands remained neutral. Which, they were right next to Belgium, where a lot of the most awful fighting in that war was, but they didn't want to get involved in it. Fair enough.
Well, they didn't really want to get involved in it in the Second World War either, but they weren't given much option.
Yeah, exactly. So they just kept playing cricket merrily by themselves in the Netherlands. So when the war broke out in October 1914, the city of Antwerp in Belgium fell to the Germans, and there was this whole massive retreat of Belgian and English soldiers out of Antwerp, and it was very chaotic and there was a lot of disarray. And a bunch of those soldiers ended up taking boats across the Scheldt River and ended up landing in the Netherlands. And the Netherlands, being a neutral country in the war, couldn't be seen like favoring either side. And so they had no other option but to put those soldiers into internment camps. And so they took about 1,500 British soldiers as far away from Belgium as they possibly could. They put them in a camp in the north of the Netherlands in a place called Groningen. And then the officers were put in a different camp nearby The Hague. And so you got to think that for all these Dutch people who were playing cricket, this was a really great opportunity for them, because all of a sudden there were all these young English men who were in the country. They like cricket. These Dutch people liked cricket as well. And so this is a great chance for them to play cricket against good opposition. And so some Dutch cricket enthusiasts began to organize games between Dutch 11s and teams of English prisoners.
Question, how do they play games if they're in prisoner of war camps?
Yeah, it's a good question. So these officers were, gentlemen, and they were well behaved, and they negotiated with the people in the camps that they would be allowed out on parole. So as long as they behaved well, they would be allowed to go off and do their own thing.
It's the most English fucking thing ever. We promise we won't try to escape. Well, he said he promises. That's
pretty much how it worked. It was a different era back then, Geoff.
I also like the idea of, from a Dutch perspective, the crisis-creating opportunity for the cricket files who lived there at the time. Wow, how good's this? We've interned a shitload of British soldiers, and that means we can play we can improve the standard of our cricket locally. I mean, that's resourceful if nothing else.
Yeah, okay. So there was this guy called Karst Postuma, who's one of the legendary pioneering figures of Dutch cricket. This guy had actually played in the county championship in 1903. He played in the very short-lived London County Cricket Club.
Yep.
That's where W.G. Grace ended up with Arthur Conan Doyle, so he's in good company.
Yeah. So when he played, his teammates included W.G. Grace and Billy Murdoch. So that's pretty illustrious company, if you ask me.
The turncoat Billy Murdoch.
So this guy, Karst Postuma, he organised a special cricket week in Haarlem where Dutch 11s would play against English prisoners. And he organised his own 11, and he played in them in this game. He was 48 years old, but he still had it in him. And then because of this, like a lot of Dutch clubs then began inviting English officers to actually play for them in the top klasse, like the top flight of Dutch cricket. And it's funny how you said, Adam, that, people are excited to take advantage of this opportunity, but there were also a bunch of people who are really unhappy about having these foreign players playing in the Dutch league because they kind of saw it as unfair because these prisoners didn't have anything to do but just sit around in a camp all week training, playing cricket. Whereas the Dutch players had to, go to work during the week. So the English players actually had an unfair advantage.
It's a particular turn of logic to be like, I'm jealous of the prisoners of war because their life is better than mine.
True that. But there was like a lot of negotiations then between like these officers in these camps and the Dutch Cricket Board. And eventually in 1918, the Dutch Cricket Board gave special permission for there to be 2 teams of English prisoners taking part in the top klasse that year. And those teams were called Prisoners of War A and Prisoners of War B. Very creative. And these teams are really good. Like, I think it's also important to emphasize that. Like, these weren't just like random people. Like, these were real cricketers who were in the armed forces who would then, after the war, go on and have like pretty big impact on cricket in England. So some of the players were Jack McBrien from Somerset, who was a Wisden Cricketer of the Year in 1925. And he was really a dusty old bastard himself. He actually played 1 test match for England. He was cap number 221. And he didn't bat, didn't bowl in a rained-out draw.
Oh.
So, poor guy.
I was going to say, it feels like the kind of person who we should have featured already. Maybe we mark a place for him, then we'll come back to that cup number in the future.
Other players included Middlesex's Jerry Crutchley, who would later on become the president of the club between 1958 and 1962. And also another Middlesex player who's got the best name ever. His name was Challen Hassler Lufkin Skeet. And he's famous because he scored 1 first-class century, which was in Middlesex's last match of the 1920 county championship season, when they sensationally defeated Surrey on the last day to win the championship after they'd come 13th the year before. And that was Plum Warner's final game as the Middlesex captain. So it's pretty awesome. I know he's on the final word shit list. So we won't
final word shit list, entrant, Plum Warner, yep.
And also there was a guy called William Worsley, who was Yorkshire captain and club president and MCC president. So they were good players, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And as you can probably imagine, they absolutely bossed the Dutch league that year. So the Prisoner of War A team won the Dutch league, and the Prisoner of War B team came 3rd in the Dutch league.
They stuck it up and they sung the song. I wonder what the Prisoner of War A song was compared to the Prisoner of War B song was. Who got to have the North Melbourne song? Every team wants the North Melbourne song, right?
Who got Tigerland?
Yeah, who got Tigerland?
I found this good memorial book, which is written to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Dutch Cricket Board. It was formed in 1890. And so, they wrote about the 1918 season that we have never seen the first class so strong again. So it was like a real high point of Dutch cricket.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But so if A came first, then B fucked it up alphabetically by coming 3rd because, there was no seat. So who's second?
All right, so this is where it gets interesting. So the second place team was a team from Haarlem called Rood en Wit, which means red and white. And not only did they manage to beat POWB, come second, finished on top of them, but they were also the only team to inflict a defeat upon POWA in the entire season.
Oh, the big one.
So this POWA team was like invincible, except for that one loss against Rood en Wit. And that one loss that they had was mostly thanks to Rood en Wit's own interned English player, which is a guy called Arthur Douglas Gay, who is the man we want to talk about.
Oh, okay. Yes. Here we go. Okay.
So they've got an English player as well. There are 2 teams of English players and then a Dutch team that has a separate English player.
Exactly.
Why?
Well, let me get into this. So basically, Arthur Gay, he was born in India in 1885, but then he went back to England and went to school there, and he was apparently a really good athlete. But he would go on to become like a career military dude. So in 1906, he joined the Bedfordshire Regiment, and he served in Gibraltar, South Africa, and Bermuda. And when he was in Bermuda in 1911, he actually played cricket for Bermuda when they toured the United States. They played a game against the Marion Cricket Club of Haverford, Pennsylvania. And Haverford is part of Philadelphia. This is one of the clubs which contributes players to the Gentlemen of Philadelphia team.
Yes.
So he basically played against the Gentlemen of Philadelphia. Pretty awesome.
And was the Dwayne Leverock of his era with Barbados as well.
He was then promoted to the rank of captain, and he joined the Royal Flying Corps, and he went off to France to fight in the war. And in June 1915, his plane was shot down over Holland, and so he was interned in Holland. And he wanted to keep playing cricket. So he was one of these first people who joined one of the Dutch clubs. So he played for Red and White from the 1916 season. I found a really cool old newspaper called La Gazette de Holland, which is like a French and English newspaper published in the Netherlands, which wrote in September 1916 about him. I'll read this quote. It says, "The 1916 season, as far as first-class cricket is concerned, is chiefly interesting for the part played by the British interned. All the first-class clubs but 3 numbered some of the British interned amongst them. There may be some differences of opinion on the participation of these gentlemen in the Dutch club matches, but it is certain that the interned have improved the cricket played on our fields. We recall in this respect the excellent games played by Captain Gay and Mr. Beadle, who gave the best display that has been seen on Dutch fields for some years past. Gay was no doubt the most elegant of the two. He always scored in the tempo most attractive to the public and placed the ball with the greatest ease wherever he wanted it."
I'm kind of thinking what a great war these guys are having. You know, the idea of having had a good war. Yeah, sure, to be shot down isn't without risk, but provided you can get down to the turf and not have died and perished in a fire, as it were, or broken bones. Playing a couple of years of cricket when over the border all hell is literally breaking loose. I mean, talk about getting lucky. Ending up in one of these sort of low-level, sort of like the low-level intern camps, like where you go when you've committed white-collar crime. You know, you're kind of in prison, sure.
Country club.
Yeah, you're in a country club. Like it's that kind of war.
Ankle bracelet country club. Yeah, you'd rather spend 2 years in Netherlands than 2 years in Belgium at that point.
Yes, quite.
Especially when you're playing cricket at this, attractive tempo. To me, that just sounds like baseball was being played in the Netherlands in 1916. Baseball, bet you didn't know that was Dutch.
It sounds kind of Dutch now that you mention it.
Yeah.
You know, it's Basketballer. So, clearly that's where it came from.
So I guess to answer your question before, Geoff, he just felt a bit of club loyalty towards the red and white team. So he kept playing for them in the 1918 season. And then that match which they played against the prisoner of war team was on the 7th of August, 1918. And it was one of the greatest club matches ever in Dutch domestic cricket history. So the undefeated POW team batted first. And they had Jack McBrien scoring 91 out of a total of 6 for 304. So it's a pretty good score. One person who played for the red and white team was also Cast Postuma, that guy I was saying who organized the games earlier. I know you love old players, Adam. By the time he was playing this game, he was 50, and he took 5 of the 6 wickets, ending up with figures of 5 for 101. So it's pretty good. And then when they were batting in reply, red and white were in total disarray. So basically their opener, a guy called Van Spengler, got bowled out for 1 when the score was just 9. And the other opener, a guy called Van Manen, was run out for 16 when the score was 41. And that brought Captain Gay to the crease. But he couldn't really do much but just stand around and watch his partners fall in quick succession. So the score went from 3 for 46 to 4 for 64 to 5 for 88. So remember, they're chasing 304. So they're 216 runs behind with half the team out at this point. And his new batting partner was another Englishman, guy called MC Platt, and they had a lot of work to do at that point. And then I found another newspaper which describes this. So I think this is a great way to, I just might just read this entire quote out here, describing the match from this newspaper called Het Vaderland. Then Gay and Platt set up an excellent position. The 100 comes up. Gay brings the total to 200 and is already approaching his century. Gay completes his 100 when the total reaches 240. There was enormous tension as to whether red and white would still win. With 19 minutes left to play, red and white still needed 29 runs to win. On 299, Platt is bowled by Graves for an excellent 82. There are then 3 minutes to play and 6 more runs are needed. Postuma, that's the 50-year-old guy, is soon on the mat and survives 3 balls. Over. Falk bowls the first ball of his over, and Gay hits a huge 6 into the woods, making the winning runs amid cheers. Platt and Gay had set up a stand of 211 runs. Gay remains with 146 not out.
Hell yeah, Captain Gay getting the job done with 2 minutes to spare to take his fellow Brits down for the pride of the top classer. This is what we're talking about.
I just love the image of just smashing a 6 into the woods. Having been to watch England play against the Netherlands at Amstelveen last year, we saw a lot of 6s getting smashed into the woods during that match.
We sure did.
Something similar.
Can you tell me, is the remind me the name of the red and white team? How did you pronounce it before?
The Dutch name is Rodenwit, which means literally red and white.
Rodenwit. The Rodenwit exists in any form in 2023? Because I feel like I'm going to become an ultra of theirs, get a tat or something.
Good question. I think they now are the thing with the Dutch clubs is a lot of them have kind of merged with each other and made all different things. But yeah, I think it still exists. It's called Haarlemse Cricket Club Rodenwit. Yeah, we should. We've got Derek Ishmael Khan as part of the Rodenwit. Next time I'm there, Julian, we'll go and watch them play a game. I'm totally up for that.
And we'll tell them the story of their club against the fucking softcock POWAs couldn't get the job done against them in 1918.
Rodenwit were the 2000 Western Bulldogs against Essendon in round 21.
That's it.
Couldn't get the perfect season.
So
people always say that.
Yeah, they do say that. They say that Captain Gay was Chris Grant with that snapshot from the pocket deep in the fourth quarter.
I always think about that. I always think about Geoff and Julian. You'll have a view on this as well. How gutsy from Chris Grant with that shot at goal to go out on his left as well. Because you're thinking, I think these days, 9 times out of 10, you're bananaing that in 2000. But to have the presence to go, no, I'm going to trust my non-preferred foot with one of the most important. And look, the Dogs could still make the finals at that point. Do you know what happens the next week? The Dogs lose to us and we bounce them in round 22 and secure our berth in the final series of 2000. Sorry, I digress.
You do. But speaking of Australian rules football, Julian has to go and watch Melbourne play a final. So thank you, Julian, for coming on the show.
Let me just chuck in one extra bit.
Please.
Yes.
Bit more here. Yeah. So that stand which Gay and Platt made, they made 211 runs for the 6th wicket. And as far as I can tell, that is still the record for the 6th wicket in Dutch top cricket.
Oh, really?
So that's like a record which has stood now for, I could find the 2018 almanac of Dutch cricket. And that was still the case then in 2018. So I assume it hasn't been broken in the last 5 years. Oh,
and I need to know before you go, and your first bounced in 6 minutes, artist of the purest water?
Yeah, so he was described in the 50th anniversary book of the Rodenwit Cricket Club as an artiest van de zuiverste water, which is a Dutch expression which kind of means like an artist of the purest quality. So they said if he was an artist with the purest quality with the bat, he was also a chivalrous and spirited man, brave as a bulldog, and capable of winning a match for his side all by himself. And so with my nerd pledge of 146, we can remember when he hit 146 to take down the prisoners of war.
Julian, before you go, I'm going to insist on something here. Please write a book about the interned Brits playing cricket. And if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it because that sounds like a book that needs to be written. But you've got first dibs on it because you are a historian based in the Netherlands.
It's something I've been thinking about. I will be in touch with you to chat about that later on, Adam.
Let's work it out. Good luck this evening.
Thank you so much for having me on.
It was our pleasure. The best possible war is kind of the title I might envisage for a book like that. All right.
Go D's.
Go D's. A little
Cheers,
bit of
mate.
Nerd Pledge history there with Julian coming on the show. Thank you for guesting.
This has been a production by Republic of Amsterdam Radio.